Opposition, Senator Plett.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My questions this afternoon will be for Minister Morneau. Minister, last month, during an appearance before a committee in the other place, the Parliamentary Budget Officer was asked if the federal debt would hit $1 trillion for this fiscal year. He responded, and I quote, "It's possible, yes. Realistic, yes. Certainly it's not unthinkable," end of quote. Minister, how much is the current debt of the Government of Canada today?
First of all, Senator, thank you very much for the question. It's a pleasure to be here. Sorry? Oh. And how do you want me to do that?
Well, somebody's supposed to do it for you, and I hope I'm not using too much of my time.
Is it working now? Okay, well, my knees are rather too large to get that much closer, so. Can you hear now?
I could hear you all along, but there may not be translation if the mic isn't on. I'm not sure.
As I was saying, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here with all of you this afternoon, and I'm happy to have the opportunity to answer your questions. I think the best way for me to answer that, Senator, is that we have said that we are going to provide an economic update to the country, and we're going to be doing that on July 8th. And at that time, we will be giving an understanding of the investments we've made and the underlying economy, which will also show what our situation is in terms of the debt and the deficit.
Minister, you have been asked this question in the past, and I believe Canadians have a right to know. I think Canadians have a right to know every day of the year what the finances are of our government. They are obligated to know every day of the year what their finances are. The Parliamentary Budget Officer has 42 members in his staff. The Minister of Finance has 800 members, staff working for him. And the Parliamentary Budget Officer with his 42 staff members has a pretty good idea on what the debt is. So, Minister, if you can't give me an answer today, then would you say that if I were to tell you that I have figures that says it's $1.3 trillion, would you confirm that that is a pretty accurate number?
Well, again, Senator, I very much appreciate the question. I think one of the things that's most important for our government, and certainly for myself as Minister of Finance, is to provide accurate information to Canadians. We're providing to Parliament, to the Finance Committee, and of course available to the Senate, an update on our expenditures in COVID-19 each 2 weeks. And there will be a complete exposition of our current financial situation on July 8th, and at that time we'll be able to give you a level of precision on our current economics and our expectations for this year.
Minister, with respect, you are now in our House, and I think we deserve an answer to a question, and not an answer that you are going to give us an economic update down the road. So again, if you cannot confirm that it is $1.3 trillion, I will have to assume that that is the correct number. Minister, who owns the debt?
Well, first, Senator, perhaps I could just say that it would be important not to make assumptions on things as important as our finances. And we will give a complete answer that would be the appropriate way for us to give an understanding to Canadians on July 8th, as I said. In terms of who owns our debt, there are, of course, many Canadians and many people around the world who seek to own Canadian debt because of the high quality of our debt and the continuing success of Canadians in creating a good and strong economy.
How much of our $1.3 trillion in debt that the Canadian government has right now is debt owned by foreign entities?
Sir, we'd be very happy to provide you with more details. If you'd like to send a set of questions to my office asking what this is.
Minister, with respect, Madam Chair. Minister, you have been asked here on our invitation to come here and answer questions. If I wanted to come to your office and ask your staff questions, I would have done that. You have 800 staff. Surely they have told you how much debt the Canadian government has and how much of it is foreign-owned and how much isn't. So please give us an answer. This committee of the whole was structured so that we would have answers. We are supposed to approve a supply bill later this week. You are not giving us answers to questions. You are inviting us to your office. We invited you here. You have staff with you. If you can't answer the question, could you ask your staffer how much debt Canada has and how much is foreign-owned?
Well, thank you, Senator, again for the question. If the questions that you're asking are specific dollar figures on specific questions that we've not prepared for in advance, I think it would be inappropriate for me to give you an approximation or a guess as to what the answer would be. And I would not put my official under that situation either. However, I am always pleased to answer those specific questions if they're submitted to my office. And if their questions are more general in nature, ones that I can answer without going back to a detailed response from my department, I'm happy to answer those questions.
You were asked quite some time ago in the House by Pierre Poilievre what the debt was. You've had lots of time to prepare that answer. What of our $1.3 trillion in debt that the Canadian government has is foreign-owned? What are the conditions? Which part of it is for a fixed term?
One of the things that we are making sure we do as we manage the Treasury function of the government is to ensure that we have the balance between the risk of rollover and the risk of the cost of longer debt balanced off. As we incur more debt, we're looking at extending the term and duration of our debt in order to provide us with less rollover risk.
Thank you. You don't have an answer to how much is foreign-owned. You don't have an answer to what the fixed terms are. Let me see if you have an answer to this. I'm really surprised that you don't have these answers because you knew they were going to be asked. The assets of the Bank of Canada have more than tripled since mid-March and now stand at over $500 billion. Minister, does the Bank of Canada have a plan to offload these assets, and if so, over what period?
Well, Senator, I think, as you may know, the Bank of Canada is independent from the federal government. So to the extent that they've done some planning and some forecast scenarios, I'm sure that I will get information on that, as will you, when the Bank of Canada decides to make that information available.
Minister, since you can't answer any of these questions, I assume it's $1.3 trillion, and if it's different than that, then I hope we will have the correct answer before we have to stand and vote on your supply bill later this week, because I expect that we should have those answers in our hands. Every one of the answers to the questions I have asked, we should have in our hands before we are asked to vote on a supply bill of the magnitude that you've only spent 4 hours debating in the other place. We are doing our job over here. We are refusing to allow the government to hold us to a 4-hour debate. So we expect the answers here, and I am quite disappointed that you come into our House and aren't prepared to give me the answers. Minister, my next question is in regards to the emergency financing of large employers. The only update concerning the large employer emergency financing facility provided in your June 8th biweekly report to the other place notes its application portal opened on May 30th. Your department told the media a week ago that zero applications have been approved under this program. How is that possible, Minister? You said this program was meant to help our energy sector, which remains in dire need of support. Minister, how many large employers have applied for financing under this program? Specifically, do you know how many large retailers, airlines, or energy companies have applied to this?
Well, thank you again for that question. The large enterprise financing facility that we've put out is intended to be a provider of the last resort for credit for organizations that are going through stress.
I don't want an explanation on what the program is supposed to be. I want a number on how many applied.
Well, sir, I was in the midst of my response, and what you should know is that the question that was asked, how many have been approved, was responded that none have been approved because it takes some time to go through these procedures. Going through these applications is relatively complex. These are large organizations. So we have a number of organizations.
No, Minister, my question was not how many have been approved. I had the number on how many had been approved. I knew it was zero. My question was how many have applied.
Could I ask, Madam Chair, what's the protocol in this House? Is it that the...
For me to ask a question and for you to answer it.
Senator McFedrin.
Is the protocol, Madam Chair, that the senator asked the question and that that in the case responding, I have the same amount of time to respond to his question?
The protocol for the Committee of the Whole is that the questioner has 10 minutes for question and answers. That is what we abide by.
I see. So it's unlike in the House where the responses are of the same duration as the question.
Exactly.
It's unlike in the House where we actually expect an answer.
So this 10 minutes has been completed. We move on to the next questioner. Senator